Hello. Okay, today we are going to be talking more in depth about the post hoc fallacy, as McRaney calls it, right? Now, this is an amazing idea because it explains so much about contemporary society, not just contemporary society, but also how we live in this strange mishmash world where, on the one hand, we have this collection of ancient kind of magical beliefs that flowed to us from our evolutionary heritage in all kinds of different scenarios that we were engaged in early on, combined, synthesized with, or uneasily in this sort of conflict with scientific method and these rational structures that we've built that have helped us to test reality and to make some sort of judgments about cause and effect and what will correlate with what, and also to maybe to predict outcomes a little bit better. So, first of all, the post hoc fallacy, as it were, is very popular among conspiracy theorists, right? Now, this is the idea, and it's very clever, that if someone benefits from something, right? The ancient Latin expression for this type of thinking being cui bono, right? Or who benefits, right? But the idea here is that if someone benefits from something, then there's likely some kind of correspondence between them having helped to produce it, right? Now, of course, this is problematic, but the fact that someone has benefited from something is given as evidence for why the thing has happened in the first place, right? Now, this type of thinking, which is sort of can become kind of paranoid, right, and suspicious, and makes us sometimes view the world as if there are these invisible figures manipulating things from behind curtains, right? Now, it's also actually connected to another very kind of common way of behaving, which is to collect talismans and charms, right? Little objects, or to ritualize one's own behavior. Don't step on the crack, you'll break your mother's back, that sort of thing. The idea being that some little thing that we do, whether it's to collect a lucky item or a magic charm, right, or certain kinds of ritualized behaviors associated, sometimes with a kind of compulsion to try to control outcomes. Let's, switch the light on and off 3 times. That way we'll know there's no intruders in the house, right? Mostly flowing from this belief that by repeating a particular action that has resulted in a certain outcome that we find beneficial in the past, if we repeat this action again, another time, right, then the same outcome will be produced, right? But that's not necessarily true. And we do know that on another sort of more rational, logical level. But our brain has this little function, a kind of a tick or a twitch in it that says, well, who knows? Let's just do it anyways, because what's the harm in doing this kind of ritualized series of actions in hope that it will produce the same outcome, right? And so, people collect little talismans and little charms. And in fact, there, of course, as there is in almost any form of human behavior, there's a massive growth industry in various kinds of ritualistic charms and incense that's being burned for luck, right? And this then will relate back to the common belief fallacy, right, which we talked about before, which is if everyone's burning incense for luck, then maybe I should try it too, right? And again, this is not to say that anyone is sort of better or kind of more rational than anyone else. Like, the point here is that we all possess this tendency to sort of think in terms of ritual and lucky charms as a way of trying to control outcomes. That, what's the harm in doing this? Who knows, right? we could be wrong, right? So this is the way of thinking. The problem is, of course, the harm is that while it's perfectly acceptable to carry around a lucky rabbit's foot or a lucky, dried chicken's foot or something like that to try to control outcomes, right? Once we start to actually assume that it's only these particular actions that have controlled outcomes, the actual nature of reality becomes more obscured to us. In other words, we don't see things anywhere close to how as they are, and our lives are shrouded in mists of kind of magical thinking, right? In which we ascribe this cause to this effect, and it's just this whole host of mystical mumbo jumbo, right, that surrounds us, and our ability to actually think causally becomes much more restricted. We become essentially kind of in a fog, right? Sometimes people talk about this as like the fog of war, right, where decision making becomes so clouded by fear, right, and by one's emotional connections to one's friends and fighting companions, that trying to determine causes and effects, trying to think rationally about a step-by-step process through which we can kind of get through these problems becomes almost impossible for people, right? So that is the harm. The harm isn't carrying the rabbit's foot. It's ascribing too much meaning to it, right? And viewing the world through a series of lucky rabbit's feet. So we're walking around, right, with rabbit's feet hanging off every part of us. That's what we want to avoid, right? And of course, we can't forget, right, the fact that when people think to themselves, well, I'm suspicious. Who is benefiting from the rise of distance education? It must be Zoom. Zoom is up to no good, right? That's a problem. However, it's based, because it's just completely wrong in terms of the after effect is being ascribed to there's no causal relationship there, right? However, people's natural suspicions that they might be being tricked, that, on the other hand, does have some basis in fact. And the ironic thing is, of course, that con artists, right, tricksters and liars and schemers, right, and greedy moneymakers who don't think very highly of human intelligence, have been trying to trick us into paying money and buying for things, or maybe just trying to control us, right, and capture by our tendency to think in this way, right? If there's no real solution for lower back pain, let's say, right? Let's say it's a problem that has, speaking of which, I got to do a little more yoga. I'm a little stiff. Then somebody rides into town in the old West with like a wagon. It says like fixes lower back pain or something, on a sign kind of wobbling on the top of the wagon. And they jump out, they start talking about how they've got the cure to everything, right? It's like these little bottles, and who knows, maybe they're kind of some sort of magician, or they seem to be, right? And they're only charging $1 for it, so what's the harm, right? And pretty soon, something like this, when it becomes mass marketed, or when the reach is much longer than just a wagon pulling into town, but instead you can buy it on the internet, right? So the economies of scale become vast, and suddenly you can reach millions of people with your product. This then becomes a problem, because now you're having con artists who are really taking advantage of this, right? So in the case of the coronavirus, you have seen many examples of this type of thing, where people are unfortunately kind of selling ideas, or saying that things kind of cure the virus that really don't, right? And this, of course, can be extremely harmful. So no drinking bleach, please, to try to ward off the effects of COVID-19. Um, but then, of course, the logic of this goes in another direction, because the odd thing is, bizarrely, that there is an effect that is actually measurable and real that is based on wishful thinking. How crazy is that?